In the vast expanse of Marakele National Park, the male lion stands as a symbol of power and pride. With its golden mane shimmering under the sun, it leads the pride, defends its territory, and maintains its reign as the king of the savanna. But on one fateful night, a deadly steel trap set by poachers steals its freedom. Trapped, bleeding, and unable to escape, the lion becomes prey, not only to the ruthless poachers, but also to the hyenas lurking in the shadows. The lionesses stand guard, determined to protect their leader, but against the weapons of man, their claws and teeth are powerless. As the darkness thickens and death seems inevitable, one man arrives. Kabelo, a park ranger, is thrust into a life-or-death struggle between man and nature. Can he save the fallen king before it's too late? Welcome to the miracle. Here, we believe that every story has the power to transform, and with Keanu Reeves as our guide, each tale becomes a beacon of hope, courage, and self-discovery. As you listen, you'll find pieces of wisdom and lessons that can bring new meaning to your everyday life. Stay with us until the final moment, because sometimes the answer you've been searching for is hidden in the journey. Don't forget to share your thoughts below. Your voice matters to us. And if these stories touch your heart, subscribe to The Miracle, turn on notifications, and be the first to embrace each new chapter of inspiration. What do you think about this story? If you found it interesting, comment good. If you weren't satisfied, type 1. And if you have your own opinion, feel free to share it in the comments section. Don't forget to hit subscribe to support the channel. It's completely free, but means so much to me. Thank you very much. The sun slowly dipped below the horizon, casting a fiery orange glow over the vast Marakele plains. The wind whispered through the golden grass, carrying the scent of dry earth and the looming presence of an approaching night. Deep in the dense bush, far from human settlements, a group of poachers was putting their ruthless plan into action. Among the thick trees, 5 armed men whispered urgently to each other. "Is the trap set?" one of them asked. "Yeah, now we just have to drive the rhinos into it, and we'll have plenty to sell," another replied, gripping his rifle tightly. They had spent the entire morning hiding massive steel traps beneath the tall grass, precisely in a narrow passage where they knew the rhino herd often traveled. Their goal was clear: sever the horns and leave the helpless creatures to die. But this time, the trap wasn't just waiting for rhinos. A few hundred meters away, a pride of lions was also making its way through the grasslands. Leading them was a majestic male lion, his golden mane flowing in the wind, his muscular frame moving with absolute authority. Behind him, 5 lionesses moved silently, their sharp eyes scanning for prey. The pride had no idea that just a few steps ahead, they were about to walk straight into an unexpected tragedy. The lions were stalking an antelope, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But then, a blood-curdling roar shattered the silence. The entire pride froze, heads snapping up, ears perked. Then, the ground trembled. A stampede of rhinos burst from the trees, crashing through the underbrush, kicking up clouds of dust. The lions' eyes flared with shock. They didn't understand what was happening, but their instincts screamed at them to get out of the way. Each lion quickly scattered, avoiding the charging beasts. But the male lion wasn't so lucky. A massive bull rhino, panicked and desperate, suddenly veered off course, heading straight for him. The lion tried to leap back, but he didn't realize where he was stepping. Snap! The sharp clank of metal rang out. The massive steel trap snapped shut around his front leg. A deafening roar of agony tore through the savanna. His powerful body jerked violently, but he was trapped. Blood began to pool beneath him. The more he struggled, the deeper the steel teeth sank into his flesh. The pain was excruciating, ripping through his muscles with every desperate pull. Roaring in frustration and agony, he thrashed wildly, trying to free himself, but the unforgiving metal held firm. The lionesses, sensing danger, immediately circled around their leader, their growls echoing in the fading light. But there was no enemy to fight, only the cold, merciless grip of a human-made trap and the rising fear in their eyes. The male lion couldn't escape, and as his strength drained away, the darkness creeping over the plains was not the only thing closing in on him. As the sun sank lower, the lions weren't the only ones who noticed their leader's weakness. Distant, eerie laughter rippled through the night air. Glowing eyes appeared in the shadows. The hyenas had caught the scent of blood. A lone hyena stepped forward from the pack, its tongue flicking over its lips in anticipation. The lionesses immediately lowered their bodies, growling fiercely. But the hyenas didn't leave. They didn't have to attack yet. They just had to wait for the male lion to weaken beyond saving. As night fully embraced the savanna, the trapped lion's breathing grew labored. His vision blurred from blood loss. The lionesses remained steadfast, refusing to leave his side. But they knew time was running out. If their leader wasn't freed by dawn, the hyenas wouldn't just linger in the distance. They would strike, ripping apart the strongest lion of the pride. And once that happened, the entire pride would be vulnerable. They needed a miracle. The male lion remained trapped, his breathing growing heavier with each passing second. But he was not alone. The lionesses stood their ground, forming a protective circle around their leader. Yet, they knew the odds were shifting against them. They weren't just fighting against the ruthless steel trap. Something else lurked in the shadows, watching. A low, raspy chuckle echoed through the night. Golden eyes glowed beneath the pale moonlight, gliding silently through the tall grass. The hyenas had arrived. They had been following the lions for a while, waiting, watching, and now they knew the moment had come. One hyena stepped forward, sniffing the air, confirming what they had already sensed. The scent of blood was stronger now. The rest followed, creeping forward, closing in. The lionesses snarled, their bodies tensed, their eyes locked onto the predators lurking in the darkness. One lioness crouched low, baring her teeth, ready to lunge at anything that dared to get too close. But the hyenas didn't rush. They had time. The male lion was growing weaker. All they needed was patience. Just a little longer, and the king of the grasslands would no longer be a threat. He could feel his body betraying him. Pain throbbed through his trapped front leg, his vision blurred, his breathing grew ragged. He wanted to roar, to fight back, but the sound that escaped was weak, barely a whisper of its former power. The blood kept flowing. His strength was fading. If he didn't get up, if he didn't fight, this would be his last night. The lionesses licked his wound, letting out desperate cries, but there was nothing more they could do. They could feel what he felt. He was slipping away. And the hyenas knew it too. But the hyenas weren't the only danger in the night. From the opposite direction, a different kind of predator approached. The poachers. They had long abandoned their search for rhinos because they had found something else instead. A lion. That wasn't the plan, one of them grumbled, tapping his rifle against his palm. The leader surveyed the scene, the lionesses surrounding their fallen king. Then, lowering his rifle slightly, his eyes gleamed with greed. Not a rhino, he muttered, but still worth something. Another poacher grinned, carefully raising his gun, aiming directly at the lionesses. If they won't leave, we'll give them a reason to run. His finger hovered over the trigger. He didn't know that something else was approaching from the distance. A man in a jeep. For now, the hyenas waited. The poachers waited. And the lion? He was slipping closer to death with each passing second. The night deepened, danger pressing in from every direction. The poachers stood still, their fingers tense on their weapons, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The hyenas remained hidden, their glowing eyes locked onto the dying lion. The lionesses paced, desperate, knowing they couldn't take on both enemies at once. The male lion's breaths grew heavier, his eyes slowly beginning to close. Death was drawing nearer, but a sound shattered the night, the deep growl of an engine. A jeep roared through the darkness, cutting through the silence. Headlights pierced the dust-filled air, illuminating the edge of the forest. The poachers jerked their heads toward the noise, startled. The hyenas hesitated, their eyes narrowing, and the lionesses, they turned toward the light, as if, for the first time, they had seen a glimmer of hope. Across the field, the poachers also turned their heads, startled, and the lionesses, cautious, their eyes fixed on the approaching light, as if they had just seen a sliver of hope. A man was coming. Kabelo, a ranger of Marakele National Park, could hardly believe the sight before him. A male lion trapped. 5 lionesses surrounding him, standing guard. Not far away, a group of poachers had their guns raised, ready to fire the first shot. And in the darkness, the hyenas, waiting, patient, knowing their time would come. Everyone was waiting for the moment when the lion would finally collapse. Kabelo swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel. He couldn't just stand by and watch. Kabelo killed the engine and stepped out of the vehicle, the headlights casting his silhouette across the hard earth. The poachers snapped their heads toward him. Their leader scowled, irritation flashing in his eyes. "A ranger," he muttered. One of the others lowered his gun slightly, glancing at his companions, waiting for orders. Kabelo knew exactly what they were thinking. He was alone. There were at least 4 of them, armed, dangerous, and willing to kill if necessary. But this was his land, and the lions, he had sworn to protect them. Taking a deep breath, he kept his voice firm but steady. "You have no right to be here." The poacher leader scoffed, but there was hesitation in his voice. "And what do you think you can do, Ranger? We haven't touched you. Walk away before things get ugly." Kabelo didn't move. His eyes locked onto the poachers, unwavering. Silence. The lionesses snarled, tense, their eyes never leaving the armed men. And then, bang! A gunshot rang through the night. The hyenas flinched. The lionesses recoiled slightly, but they did not run. The bullet had missed Kabelo, but it was a warning. The poacher leader narrowed his eyes, his gun still trained on the ranger. They were testing him. Would he back down? Kabelo didn't so much as flinch. Instead, he reached for his radio, flipping the switch. "We have armed poachers in the western sector. Request immediate backup." A tense voice crackled back through the speaker. "Backup arriving in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Could he hold them off that long? But the poachers weren't the only danger. The hyenas had not left. They had smelled the weakness in the pride. They knew the male lion was defenseless. They knew the poachers wouldn't be here forever. One hyena stepped forward, ears pricked, sniffing the air, confirming that the scent of blood was stronger than before. The others followed, inching closer, their circle tightening. The lionesses remained tense, but exhaustion was setting in. They couldn't fight forever. The poacher leader studied Kabelo for a long moment. Then, lowering his rifle slightly, he clicked his tongue in frustration. He knew killing a ranger would bring trouble, and with reinforcements coming, they were running out of time. "Let's go," he hissed. The poachers hesitated, but one by one, they melted into the shadows, disappearing into the night. Kabelo knew they would be back someday, but tonight they had failed. He had won, at least for now. Kabelo turned, heart still hammering in his chest. The soft, eerie laughter still echoed. The hyenas had not given up. They were waiting for the male lion to fall for good, but this time they wouldn't get their chance. Kabelo raised his rifle and fired a rubber bullet at the lead hyena. Thwack! It didn't kill, but it was enough. The startled hyena yelped, jerking back. The others hesitated, watching their leader for direction. Then, with a final snarl, the lead hyena spun and fled, taking the pack with it, vanishing into the night. Kabelo exhaled, relieved, but the fight wasn't over. Now, only one thing mattered, freeing the lion from the deadly trap. But he had already lost too much blood. Night had fully descended upon the savanna. The poachers were gone. The hyenas had vanished. But the danger was far from over. In the middle of the vast grasslands, the male lion lay motionless, its front legs still trapped in the deadly steel jaws of the poacher's snare. The lionesses remained by his side, their eyes filled with worry. Kabelo knelt beside the massive animal, carefully assessing its condition. It was still alive, but there was no time to waste. Taking a deep breath, Kabelo steadied himself as he examined the brutal steel trap crushing the lion's leg. What do you think about this story? If you found it interesting, comment good. If you weren't satisfied, type 1. And if you have your own opinion, feel free to share it in the comments section. Don't forget to hit subscribe to support the channel. It's completely free, but means so much to me. Thank you very much. It had been designed for animals weighing several tons, like rhinos, making its grip unbreakable by sheer force alone. He needed to open it now. If he didn't act quickly, the lion would lose too much blood, and even if freed, it wouldn't survive. The lionesses growled softly, their trust in the human before them still uncertain. One of them crouched lower, eyes locked on Kabelo, muscles tense. It was ready to attack the moment anything seemed off. Slowly, Kabelo raised his hands, speaking in a low, calm voice. "I'm here to help. Trust me." Of course, he knew they couldn't understand his words, but lions had instincts. They could sense whether a being was friend or foe, and right now, Kabelo was not their enemy. Kabelo dropped to his knees, gripping the edges of the trap. He braced himself and pulled. Nothing. The rusted metal was weathered but still as solid as stone. It wouldn't open with brute strength alone. The male lion let out a weak whimper, its body trembling from the loss of blood. Kabelo clenched his jaw, realizing he needed another approach. Pulling out his utility knife, he wedged the blade into a small opening in the trap, carefully prying at the mechanism. Click! A faint metallic sound echoed in the silence. The lionesses flinched, growling softly, but Kabelo didn't stop. He tightened his grip and forced the knife deeper. Something shifted. Then bang! A loud snap as one side of the trap sprang open. The male lion roared, its body jerking upward in reflex, but it still couldn't stand. The trap was still clamped around part of its leg. It had to be fully removed. Without hesitation, Kabelo flipped the trap slightly and placed both hands on the remaining section, pushing with every ounce of strength he had. 1 second. 2 seconds. Crack! The trap burst open. The lion let out another roar, painful but free. The lionesses rushed in, immediately licking at his wound, as if inspecting their leader's injury. Kabelo took a step back, but he didn't leave. His work wasn't done. The wound was serious. The snare was gone, but the damage remained. The lion's veins had been crushed, its flesh torn. If not treated, the loss of blood alone would still kill it. Kabelo moved fast. Pulling out disinfectant and bandages from his medical kit, he knelt beside the lion once more. The lionesses remained tense, but they didn't attack. They were beginning to trust. Kabelo poured antiseptic over the wound. The lion shuddered, letting out a weak growl. Then, carefully, Kabelo wrapped the bandage around its leg, ensuring minimal pain as he secured it tightly. One wrong move, and he could be killed instantly. 15 minutes passed. The wound was bandaged. But could the lion stand? The pride waited in silence. Kabelo took a slow step back, his heart pounding. The male lion twitched its leg. Once, twice. It tried to rise, but the pain was too much. It staggered, then collapsed. The lionesses hissed in distress, pressing closer. Kabelo clenched his fists. It needed more time, but did it have any left? The first faint streaks of dawn began painting the sky. A long night was finally ending. But the male lion still couldn't stand. Kabelo sat there, watching its every breath, his chest tight with worry. He had done everything he could. Now nature would decide if it lived or died. The lionesses lowered their heads, gently nuzzling their leader's face, as if urging him to try one more time. Then, a low, rumbling growl. The male lion stirred. He tried again. The entire pride held its breath. Kabelo held his breath. The lion trembled, muscles tensing. And then, it stood tall. The first light of dawn broke through the darkness, casting a warm golden hue over the vast plains of Marakele National Park. The early morning breeze carried the scent of damp earth, awakening the wild creatures as they prepared to embrace a new day. In the heart of the grasslands, the lion stood up. After a night of agony and a brush with death, it had endured. The lionesses surrounded him, their eyes filled with respect and encouragement. Kabelo remained still, silently watching every movement of the majestic creature he had just saved. But this was not the end. It needed to move on. It needed to return to its freedom. A little farther away, the hyenas still lingered. They were scattered among the tall grass, their eyes locked onto the lion. Even though the poachers had retreated and the trap had been removed, the hyenas still clung to the hope that the lion was too weak to fight. One of them let out a sharp, eerie cry, a signal to the others. They were considering another attack. Kabelo saw it all, but he couldn't intervene. This time, only the lion itself could put an end to the threat. The lionesses had also sensed the enemy's presence. They were not panicked, nor did they strike first. They were waiting for their leader. The lion took a step. It pressed its paw against the earth, but pain flared up, causing it to hesitate. The lionesses moved closer, not growling, not urging. They simply stood by its side, watching, waiting. Kabelo took a step back, his eyes fixed on every movement. He knew that lions were proud creatures. Even wounded, it would not allow itself to appear weak in front of its pride. A tense silence filled the air. Then, the lion let out a low rumble before firmly lifting its injured leg once more. This time, it did not collapse. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. The lionesses immediately fell in line beside him, forming a protective formation around their leader. Kabelo remained still, observing. He could hardly believe he was standing so close to Africa's most formidable predators, and they did not see him as a threat. The lion walked a short distance before suddenly stopping. It turned its head, locking eyes with Kabelo. There was no more pain, no more fear, only a silent understanding. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then it let out a soft, low growl, not one of dominance, but of acknowledgement. A silent farewell, a quiet thank you. Kabelo didn't move, but something deep within him stirred. He had saved it, and it understood. But this was not the final chapter. The hyenas had not yet abandoned their hope. Even after seeing the lion rise, they still wondered if it was truly strong enough to fight. One stepped forward, baring its teeth in a silent challenge, as if to ask, "Are you truly as strong as before?" The lion saw it, and then, roar! A thunderous roar shattered the silence, echoing across the plains. The hyenas froze, their bodies stiffening. There was no need for further tests. The lion was still the king of this land. Without a moment's hesitation, the pack let out shrill cries and scattered, disappearing into the sea of grass. The lionesses flicked their tails, watching their enemies retreat before turning back to their leader. They knew. Nature's balance had been restored. Kabelo inhaled deeply, feeling a weight lift from his chest. He had done the right thing. But he didn't know that this would not be the last time he would see the king of the plains. A week later, as Kabelo drove along his usual patrol route, he saw it again. From a distance, a golden figure stood in the middle of the grasslands, silently watching the jeep. The lion. It did not move closer, nor did it run away. It simply stood there, watching, as if confirming that the man who had saved it was still there, still guarding this land. Kabelo smiled and gave a small nod, and the lion turned, disappearing into the endless wilderness. But both of them knew, whether man or beast, some bonds require no words, and some bonds will never fade.